The chamber was cold and dark. Zekthar sat in the chair, his body broken and tired. His carapace had cracks running through it like spider webs. One of his eyes was clouded and useless. The other eye stared across the table at the council archivist, a being called Melvera, who wanted to hear his story. Zekthar did not want to speak. The memories hurt worse than his physical wounds, but the galaxy needed to know. They needed to understand what humanity truly was before someone else made the same mistake his people had made. "Begin when you are ready," Melvera said softly. Zekthar's mandibles clicked together nervously. He remembered when he had been proud, when he had stood on the bridge of a mighty warship as part of the Vraxian Dominion's Fifth Fleet. The Fifth Fleet had been undefeated for 3 centuries. They had conquered 40 systems. They had brought 100 species under Vraxian rule when they found the humans. It seemed like it would be easy. The human colony on Epsilon Prime was small. Only 12,000 humans lived there, scattered across mining settlements and farming communities. The planet was on the edge of human space, barely defended. Intelligence reports said the humans had only 3 frigates protecting the entire world. The Vraxians brought 40 warships. It should have been simple. The Vraxians would arrive, demonstrate their superior power, and the humans would surrender. That was how it always worked. Every species understood when they were beaten. Every species valued survival over pride, except humans. Commander Kyle Harper led the human defense. Zekthar learned his name later from the intercepted communications. Harper was young for a human commander, barely into his 3rd decade of life. He commanded the 3 frigates with a crew that was mostly volunteers, miners and farmers who had basic military training. When the Vraxian fleet arrived, they sent the standard demand for surrender. They explained that resistance was futile. They promised fair treatment if the humans submitted peacefully. They gave them 1 hour to decide. The human response came in 30 seconds. "We're not leaving." 3 words. That was all Commander Harper said. Then he ordered his ships to attack. Zekthar still remembered the confusion on his commander's face. It made no sense. 3 ships against 40? The humans had to know they would die. Every tactical analysis said the same thing. The humans could not win. So why fight? The Vraxians opened fire, expecting the humans to break and run after the first exchange. Human shields were weaker than Vraxian shields. Human weapons were less advanced. By every measure, the Vraxians were superior, but the humans did not run. Harper's flagship, a frigate called the Defiant, took hit after hit. Its shields collapsed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Half the crew died in the first 5 minutes of combat. But Harper kept coming. He pushed the Defiant forward, engines at maximum, straight toward the Vraxian dreadnought conquest. "What is he doing?" Zekthar's commander had asked. The tactical officer had no answer. The Defiant was finished. It should have been retreating or surrendering or at least trying to minimize casualties. Instead, it accelerated. The Vraxians kept firing. The Defiant was falling apart. Entire sections of the ship were gone, but it kept moving forward with terrible purpose. Too late, Zekthar understood. "He's going to ram us," someone shouted. The Conquest tried to turn, but the dreadnought was too large, too slow. The Defiant crashed into the engine core at full speed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the reactor containment failed. The explosion was like a small sun being born. The Defiant vanished instantly. The Conquest broke apart, its rear half simply ceasing to exist. Debris and radiation spread outward. 2 nearby Vraxian ships took critical damage from the blast. 3 ships destroyed. Hundreds of Vraxian warriors dead. And for what? The humans had lost 1 frigate and accomplished nothing strategic. They still could not win, but Zekthar saw something in that moment that terrified him. He saw that the humans did not care about winning in the traditional sense. They cared about making the Vraxians pay for every inch of space, for every human life taken. The 2 remaining human frigates fought for 6 more hours. They used tactics the Vraxians had never seen. They hid in the planet's magnetic field where sensors could not track them properly. They used debris fields as cover. They fired and retreated, never staying in one place long enough to be cornered. One frigate, commanded by Captain Lauren Blake, managed to destroy 2 more Vraxian cruisers before it was finally overwhelmed. But even then, even as the ship was dying, Blake did something unexpected. She broadcast her ship's destruction on all channels. She made sure every human on Epsilon Prime and every Vraxian in the fleet watched her ship explode. "For Epsilon," she said, just before the end, "make them bleed." The last frigate fought alone for another hour. Its captain, a man named Jack Morrison, refused every offer to surrender. When his weapons were destroyed, he used his ship as a battering ram, trying to repeat Harper's success. The Vraxians were ready this time. They destroyed the frigate before it could reach its target. The battle for space was over. The Vraxians had won, technically, but they had lost 5 ships and over 1,000 warriors. Against 3 frigates, against an enemy that should have been no threat at all, Zekthar commander High Admiral Zaltos was furious. He ordered the fleet to move into orbit and began preparing for ground assault. The humans on the surface had no military installations, no planetary defenses. They were just civilians with mining equipment and farming tools. "This will be quick," Zaltos said. "We will show them the price of resistance." But Zekthar felt a cold fear growing in his chest. He looked at the planet below, at the 12,000 humans who now knew they were going to die. Humans who had just watched their defenders sacrifice themselves rather than surrender. He wondered what desperate, cornered humans might do. He wondered if they would fight the same way their military had fought, with no concern for their own survival. With nothing to lose, the answer came the next morning, when the first Vraxian dropships descended toward the largest human settlement. The humans were waiting, and Zekthar learned that battles in space had been merciful, compared to what humans could do on the ground, fighting for their homes with hate in their hearts, and nothing left to lose but their lives. That was when he began to understand the terrible truth about humanity. They were not warriors in the traditional sense. They were survivors. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, they would not do to survive. Zekth's voice grew quieter as he continued his testimony. Mavera leaned forward, listening carefully. The other council members watched in silence through viewing screens, their alien faces showing various expressions of concern. The ground assault on Epsilon Prime had seemed simple at first. The Vraxians had superior armor, superior weapons, and superior numbers. They had fought ground campaigns on dozens of worlds. They knew how to conquer planets efficiently, and with minimal losses, but the humans did not fight like any enemy the Vraxians had encountered before the first dropship landed near the main settlement, a mining town called Hope's End. 200 Vraxian warriors disembarked, weapons ready, expecting frightened civilians to flee or surrender. Instead, they found empty streets and silence. The trap was perfect. The humans had turned their entire town into a weapon. Every building was rigged with explosives made from mining charges. Every street corner hid armed civilians. Every window held a sniper. The Vraxians advanced cautiously, and then the world exploded around them. Zekthar had watched from orbit as the entire settlement detonated. The humans had destroyed their own town, their own homes, just to kill 200 Vraxian warriors. The tactical computers calculated the exchange ratio. 200 Vraxians dead. Approximately 800 humans dead in the blast, including their own people. Madness, High Admiral Zaltos had said. They're killing themselves. But it was not madness. It was mathematics. Cold, brutal mathematics. The humans knew they could not win through conventional means, so they changed the equation. They made every victory cost so much that winning became losing. The other settlements followed the same pattern. The humans did not defend territory. They destroyed it. They did not try to preserve their infrastructure. They weaponized it. Farms became minefields. Water treatment plants became chemical weapon factories. Schools became fortified positions that had to be destroyed room by room. Floor by floor got Captain Lauren Blake's sister, a civilian named Diana Blake. led the resistance in one of the smaller settlements. She had been a teacher before the war. She taught children mathematics and literature. When the Vraxians came, she taught them something else. She taught them how to build bombs from fertilizer. She taught them how to make poison from common chemicals. She taught them how to kill. The Vraxians captured her settlement after 3 days of fighting. They found Diana Blake in the ruins of her school, wounded and unable to flee. They brought her before High Admiral Zoltos, expecting her to beg for mercy or provide intelligence about human defenses. Instead, she smiled. "You're standing on top of the fuel storage tanks," she said. Then she pressed the detonator she had been hiding. The explosion killed her, killed Zoltos, and killed 43 Vraxian warriors. Command of the fleet passed to the next senior officer, who was far less experienced and far more frightened. Zekthar remembered that day clearly. The day the Vraxians realized they were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting an entire population that had decided death was preferable to surrender. But the true horror came when the Vraxians tried to use their superior technology against the humans. The Vraxians deployed boarding parties onto the orbital stations that humans used for refining minerals. These stations were civilian installations with no military value. The Vraxians planned to capture them intact and use them as bases. The humans had other plans. A young officer named Jack Morrison led a group of 40 miners. In the defense of Station 7, they had no military training. They had mining equipment and maintenance tools. They had no chance of winning a direct fight against armored Vraxian warriors. So they did not fight directly. Morrison studied everything they had captured about Vraxian biology. He learned that Vraxians communicated partly through pheromones. He learned they were sensitive to temperature changes. He learned their armor had vulnerabilities in the joint seals. Then he turned the station into a death trap specifically designed for Vraxians. He vented sections of the station to space, but only partially, just enough to create pressure differentials that made Vraxian sensors malfunction. He heated some corridors to extreme temperatures and froze others, forcing the Vraxians to constantly adjust their armor's environmental systems. He released chemical compounds that mimicked Vraxian pheromones, creating false signals that confused their coordination. The Vraxian boarding party of 150 warriors was cut down to 20 survivors in 6 hours of fighting. They never saw their enemy clearly. The humans attacked from ventilation shafts, from behind bulkheads, from maintenance crawl spaces too small for armored Vraxians to enter. When the surviving Vraxians finally retreated, Morrison did not celebrate. He immediately began planning the next phase. He took a small team and infiltrated the Vraxian supply ship that was docked nearby. Using the station's external maintenance tubes, the Vraxians never imagined humans could survive in hard vacuum long enough to make the crossing. Morrison and his team wore emergency suits designed for brief exposures. They had maybe 10 minutes of safety. They made the crossing and ate. Once aboard the Vraxian supply ship, they did not sabotage the engines or weapons. That would have been expected. Instead, Morrison released a modified version of a crop virus into the ship's environmental system. The virus was harmless to humans but devastating to the specific bacteria that Vraxian biological filters used to clean their air. The supply ship returned to the fleet and docked with other vessels, spreading the contamination. Within 2 days, half the Vraxian fleet was struggling with environmental system failures. Warriors became sick. Command efficiency dropped. Fear spread. That was when Zekthar truly understood what humans were doing. They were not trying to destroy the Vraxian fleet through superior firepower. They were trying to make the Vraxians afraid. Every attack was designed to create maximum psychological impact. Every human who died made sure their death caused Vraxian casualties. The humans broadcast everything. Every Vraxian warrior who fell, every ship that was damaged, every setback the fleet suffered. They sent it on all frequencies, making sure every human on Epsilon Prime saw that resistance was working. Making sure every Vraxian saw that humans would not stop. Zekthar watched his fellow warriors begin to crack under the pressure. They were not cowards. They had fought in many battles, but they had never fought an enemy like this. An enemy that treated their own lives as ammunition. An enemy that studied Vraxian weaknesses with scientific precision and exploited them without mercy. The new fleet commander, Admiral Corvin, made a decision. He declared that the ground campaign was taking too long and costing too many lives. He ordered the fleet to move to high orbit and prepare for orbital bombardment. They would destroy Epsilon Prime completely, turn the entire surface into molten glass. If the humans would not surrender, they would simply cease to exist. The order was given. The weapons charged. The bombardment would begin in 1 hour. Zekthar watched the human response with growing horror. Every civilian transport on the planet launched at once. Mining shuttles, cargo haulers, personal craft. Hundreds of vessels rising from the surface, all heading directly toward the Vraxian fleet. They were not evacuating. They were attacking. Each transport was loaded with whatever explosives and fuel the humans could gather. Each was piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive. They came in a massive wave, too many targets to stop them all. Zekthar's ship shot down dozens of them. But dozens more got through. They crashed into Vraxian vessels with devastating effect. One transport hit the bombardment ship's main weapon array, destroying it completely. Another crashed through a cruiser's bridge, killing everyone inside. The bombardment was delayed. Then delayed again. Then cancelled. The Vraxians had won the battle for Epsilon Prime, technically. But as Zekthar looked at the casualty reports and the damaged ships, he realized the terrible truth. The humans had won something more important. They had shown the galaxy what happened when you pushed them to the edge. They fought back with everything they had. And they made you pay for every inch. Melvera noticed that Zekthar's remaining good eye had begun to water. The alien was reliving trauma with every word. But he continued speaking. The galaxy needed to hear this. After Epsilon Prime fell, the Vraxian Dominion expected the war to end. They had destroyed the human colony. They had killed thousands. Surely humanity would see that resistance was futile. Surely they would negotiate for peace. They were wrong. The message came 3 days later. It was broadcast on every channel, sent to every Vraxian ship, transmitted to the Dominion homeworld itself. A human in a dark uniform appeared on the screen. His face was hard and his eyes were cold. "I am Admiral Daniel Cross of the Earth Defense Fleet," he said. "You killed 12,000 civilians on Epsilon Prime. You rejected every offer of peaceful contact. You chose war." He paused, and Zekthar remembered feeling a chill run through his body at what came next. "Now you will learn what human war really means." The transmission ended. 6 hours later, the Earth Defense Fleet arrived in Vraxian space. Zekthar had expected a large fleet. Humanity's industrial capacity was known to be significant. But he was not prepared for what emerged from the jump points: 300 warships. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, all built with one purpose: to fight the Vraxian Dominion. And unlike the desperate defenders of Epsilon Prime, these ships were crewed by professional military personnel who had trained for this moment. The first engagement happened near a Vraxian mining colony. The Vraxians had 40 ships defending it. The humans brought 60, but numbers were not what decided the battle. It was how the humans fought. They did not engage at long range where Vraxian energy weapons had the advantage. They closed distance rapidly, accepting damage to their shields and armor, getting close enough to deploy their marines. And human marines were unlike any boarding force the Vraxians had encountered. Sergeant Maya Collins became a name that Vraxian warriors whispered with fear. She led a boarding team onto a Vraxian heavy cruiser during the battle. Her assault shuttle was hit during approach, and her suit was compromised. She had a crack in her helmet that was leaking atmosphere. Standard doctrine said she should abort. Any reasonable being would retreat to safety. Maya Collins kept fighting. For 7 minutes, she operated in hard vacuum. The cold should have killed her. The lack of oxygen should have killed her. But human biology had strange endurance. She fought through corridors, shooting Vraxian defenders. Using hand signals to coordinate her team because she could not speak without air, she reached the ship's bridge, killed the command crew, and secured the airlock. Only then did she seal her helmet breech and take a breath. The Vraxians who witnessed it could not believe what they had seen. It was not possible. It defied logic. But human combat footage did not lie. She had fought for 7 minutes in conditions that should have killed her within one. That was the first time Zekthar heard the phrase that would haunt his nightmares. Humans don't die easy. The battles continued. The humans showed no mercy and expected none. When the Vraxians tried to use their superior energy shields, the humans deployed kinetic weapons that punched through shields through sheer mass and velocity. When the Vraxians adapted, the humans switched to electromagnetic pulse weapons that disabled. Vraxian electronics, every battle taught the humans something new. They learned Vraxian ship designs. They learned communication protocols. They learned tactical preferences. And they adapted faster than the Dominion could counter. Commander Peter Grant became famous for his intelligence operations. He commanded a stealth frigate that spent 2 weeks following a Vraxian supply convoy without being detected. He did not attack. He just watched and learned. He learned their routes. He learned their schedules. He learned their communication codes. He learned which ships carried what supplies and where they were going. Then he acted. Grant hacked into the Vraxian navigation network. He did not destroy it. He modified it subtly, just small changes to routing algorithms. The supply convoy kept operating normally, but the modifications he made caused the navigation systems to slowly drift off course. The Vraxian reserve fleet, following what they thought were the correct supply routes, was led directly into a stellar radiation belt. The intense radiation disabled their ship's systems. They were sitting targets when the human fleet arrived, 40 Vraxian warships destroyed without the humans firing a shot. But it was the human response to Vraxian atrocities that truly terrified Zekthar. When Vraxian forces executed captured human prisoners, hoping to intimidate humanity into surrender, the response was swift and brutal. Humanity captured a Vraxian admiral and his command staff. They were interrogated, and then the humans did something that violated every rule of warfare the galaxy recognized. They executed the Vraxian officers slowly and broadcast it on all channels. The message was clear: you kill our prisoners, we kill yours. You escalate, we escalate further. You cannot win this game. The Dominion leadership was outraged. They sent protests to the Galactic Council. They demanded sanctions against humanity. The Council sent diplomatic messages urging restraint. Humanity ignored them all. Admiral Cross sent a simple response: end the war. Or it gets worse. It got worse. The humans had been studying Vraxian biology since first contact. They had samples from captured soldiers. They had medical data from various sources. Human scientists had been working on something terrible. The Battle of Tharkan was where humanity revealed their true capacity for ruthlessness. The Vraxians had fortified the system heavily. 300 ships defended it. Orbital platforms ringed the inhabited worlds. It should have been impossible to take. The human fleet arrived with 200 ships. They engaged the Vraxian defenses, and the battle was fierce. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The fighting lasted for days. Then the Vraxians noticed something strange. Their crews were getting sick. Not from wounds or radiation. They were developing symptoms that their medical staff could not identify. Fevers, organ failure, neural degradation. A plague was spreading through the Vraxian fleet. A plague that was genetically engineered to target Vraxian biology specifically. It was harmless to humans and to every other known species. But to Vraxians, it was devastating. The human fleet withdrew while the plague did its work. They did not even need to fight. They just waited. 70% of the Vraxian defenders died. The rest were too sick to fight. The humans took the system without firing another shot. Zekthar's voice broke as he described that moment. They had made a weapon that killed only us. Only Vraxians. They had turned biology itself into a weapon of war. The Dominion tried to retaliate. They threatened human colonies. They threatened to use weapons of mass destruction. But humanity had already shown they were willing to use such weapons themselves. And the Vraxians realized they were locked in a spiral of escalation with an enemy that would always go one step further. Humanity sent a message after Tharkan. Admiral Cross appeared on screen again. "We can end this whenever you want," he said. "Withdraw from all human space. Pay reparations. Stand trial for war crimes. Or we can continue and you will lose everything." The Dominion refused. Pride would not allow surrender to a species they still considered inferior. So humanity prepared for the final phase of the war. They were going to strike at the Vraxian homeworld itself. They were going to show the Dominion what total war really meant, and Zekthar, watching from his damaged ship, knew with terrible certainty that his people had made a mistake they could not recover from. They had awakened something in humanity that should have been left sleeping. They had pushed a peaceful species into becoming something cold. Calculating and utterly without mercy, the humans were coming, and nothing would stop them. Zekthar's hands trembled as he reached for the water container on the table. Mavera waited patiently. The council members watching remained silent. They needed to hear the rest. No matter how difficult it was, the final months of the war were when Zekthar learned the true meaning of fear. Not the fear of death in battle, which was quick and honorable, but the fear of an enemy that had studied you so completely that they knew exactly how to break you. Humanity sent deep strike teams into Vraxian territory. These were not armies meant to conquer. They were specialists meant to terrify. Colonel Lisa Martin led many of these operations, and her methods were brutally effective. She did not attack military targets. She attacked infrastructure. She did not kill soldiers. She killed morale. Her teams would infiltrate Vraxian colonies and sabotage power grids, water supplies, and communication networks. They would leave the populations alive but helpless, dependent on their government for rescue. Then they would intercept the rescue ships and destroy them. The message was clear: your government cannot protect you. You are alone. Worse, Colonel Martin's teams recruited from the client species that the Vraxian Dominion had conquered over the centuries. These species had been living under Vraxian rule, some for generations. They had accepted Vraxian dominance because the alternative was destruction, but humanity showed them that the Vraxians could be beaten. Humanity armed them. Humanity trained them. Humanity gave them hope that freedom was possible. Rebellions started breaking out across Vraxian space. Species that had been peaceful subjects for decades suddenly turned violent. The Dominion had to divert military resources to suppress these uprisings, weakening their ability to fight humanity. Zekthar watched his civilization begin to fracture from within. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were dismantling an empire. Then came the negotiations. The Dominion leadership, seeing the writing on the wall, attempted to end the war through diplomacy. They offered territorial concessions. They offered reparations for Epsilon Prime. They even offered to surrender the military commanders responsible for the attack. Including the now-dead High Admiral Zaltos, the human negotiator was ambassador. Richard Hayes. He listened to every offer. He reviewed every proposal. He considered every concession. Then he said one word: no. The Vraxian diplomats were confused. They had offered everything short of total surrender. What more could humanity want? Complete capitulation, Hayes said. Your military disbanded. Your government restructured under human oversight. Every Vraxian involved in war crimes tried and punished. Nothing less is acceptable. The Dominion refused. To accept such terms would mean the end of Vraxian civilization as they knew it. It was too much. They would rather fight to the last ship. Humanity had expected this answer. They were prepared for it. What followed was psychological warfare on a scale Zekthar had never imagined possible. The humans had spent months hacking Vraxian communication networks. They had access to personnel files, family records, personal communications. They knew everything about every Vraxian warrior in the fleet. Captain Andrew Stone commanded a human cruiser assigned to attack Vraxia Prime's orbital defenses. But he did not attack immediately. For 3 months, his ship sat just outside the system, monitoring communications and gathering intelligence. His team learned the name of every defender. They learned about their families. They learned about their homes. They learned their fears, their hopes, their personal histories. Then Captain Stone began sending messages. Personal messages. Individual communications to each defender. A young Vraxian pilot named Kexler received a message describing his family in detail. His mate, his 3 offspring, the home they lived in, the school the children attended. The message explained in precise detail what would happen to them when the human fleet arrived. It described the bombardment, the fire, the screams. It was not a threat. It was a promise, backed by the evidence of what humanity had already done to other Vraxian worlds. Thousands of defenders received similar messages, each one personalized, each one accurate, each one terrifying. The psychological impact was devastating. These were not faceless enemies anymore. These were humans who knew everything about you, who had studied you, who understood exactly how to hurt you. Where you were most vulnerable, the orbital defenses surrendered without firing a single shot. Entire crews abandoned their posts. Some fled, some simply gave up. The will to fight had been broken not by superior weapons but by superior intelligence, and the calculated use of fear. Zekthar was with the Fifth Fleet when they made their final stand above Epsilon Prime. It was the last significant Vraxian military force remaining. 60 ships against humanity's full fleet strength. The humans could have overwhelmed them with numbers. Instead, they made an example. The battle was brutal. Human ships that were damaged beyond any reasonable combat capability continued fighting. Zekthar watched a human destroyer, the Retribution, lose its entire port side to Vraxian fire. The ship was venting atmosphere, half its crew dead, systems failing throughout. It should have withdrawn. Any sane commander would have ordered retreat to preserve what remained of the crew and ship. Instead, the Retribution accelerated. It came straight at Zekthar's flagship, engines at maximum, using its dying moments to inflict maximum damage. It crashed into the flagship's bridge, killing the command crew instantly. Zekthar survived only because he was in the secondary control center. But he watched his commander die. He watched the ship begin to break apart. He made it to an escape pod and launched, watching his mighty flagship split in 2 from the pod. He witnessed the final moments of the battle. He saw human ships using tactics that defied all logic. He saw them sacrifice themselves to destroy Vraxian vessels. He saw them fight with a determination that went beyond training or duty. They fought like beings who had something to prove. Like they needed the Vraxians to understand that humanity could not be defeated, could not be intimidated, could not be made to submit. And then Zekthar saw something that made his blood run cold. A new human ship entered the system. It was different from the others. Larger, strange energy readings emanated from it. Admiral Cross broadcast a message to the remaining Vraxian ships. This is your final warning. Surrender now, or we deploy the stellar destabilizer. Zekthar did not know what that meant, but the tone in Cross's voice told him everything he needed to know. The humans had built something terrible, something that would make all their previous weapons look merciful by comparison. The Vraxian fleet commander demanded to know what the weapon was. Cross explained in simple terms. It was a device that would cause Vraxia's star to become unstable. Not immediately, not in a catastrophic supernova, but slowly, over the course of months, the star would increase its radiation output. The planets would become uninhabitable. Billions of Vraxians would die slowly from radiation poisoning. You cannot be serious, the Vraxian commander said. You would commit genocide? Kill billions of civilians? You killed 12,000 civilians on Epsilon Prime, Cross replied. You started this war. We are simply willing to finish it, completely, permanently, so that you never threaten humanity again. There was silence on all channels. Zekthar, floating in his escape pod, felt something break inside him. They were serious. The humans were actually prepared to destroy an entire star system to win. The Vraxian commander surrendered. Total, unconditional surrender. Every term humanity demanded was accepted. The war was over. Zekthar learned later that the stellar destabilizer might not have actually worked. Human scientists were not certain it would function as designed. But it did not matter. The threat alone was enough. The humans had won not through superior technology or greater numbers. They had won because they were willing to go further than anyone else. They were willing to do things that civilized species would not even consider, and the terrifying truth was that they had done it all while claiming to be the victims. The defenders, the ones who had been forced into this war, perhaps they were right. But that did not change what they had become in the process. The chamber remained silent for a long moment after Zekthar finished describing the final battle. Mavera studied the broken alien across from her. The other council members watched through their screens, processing what they had heard. Finally, Mavera asked the question that had been on everyone's mind since the testimony began. "Why did you agree to speak with us? You know, this testimony will brand you a traitor to the Dominion. Your own people will despise you for revealing their defeat in such detail." "So why?" Zekthar's mandibles clicked slowly. His good eye focused on Malvera with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Because the galaxy must understand what humanity truly is," he said quietly, "before someone else makes our mistake." He leaned forward, his cracked carapace creaking with the movement. "The Vraxian Dominion ruled our sector for 3 centuries. We conquered through superior strength. We believed in the natural order, the strong rule, the weak submit. It was simple. It was logical. It worked for generations." Zekthar's voice grew harder. "But humanity revealed a truth we had never considered. They are not the strongest species. They are not the most advanced. By every objective measure, we should have defeated them easily. But we failed because we misunderstood the fundamental nature of their warfare." Malvera leaned forward. "Explain." "Every species in this galaxy fights to achieve objectives," Zekthar said. "We fight to gain territory, resources, political advantage. We use military force to accomplish specific goals. When those goals become too costly, we negotiate. We compromise. We find peaceful solutions." He paused and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Humans do not fight to achieve objectives. They fight to eliminate threats, permanently." One of the council members, a crystalline being named Sharduk, spoke up through the communication system. "Surely that is an exaggeration. Humanity has been a member of the galactic community for years. They engage in trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange. They seem peaceful enough." Zekthar made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. "Yes, they seem peaceful. They are peaceful. Until they are not. And that transformation happens in an instant when they perceive existential threat." He gestured to his damaged body. "I spoke with a captured human soldier after one of the battles. A young woman named Michelle Davis. She was a corporal, barely 20 years old. I asked her why humans fought so savagely. Why they were willing to die in such numbers." Zekthar's voice took on a strange quality, as if he were reciting words burned into his memory. She said, "We don't fight until we win. We fight until you lose." I did not understand the distinction at first. She explained it simply. "Victory for humans does not mean defeating their enemy in battle. It means ensuring that enemy can never threaten them again." Malvera considered this. "That still sounds like standard military doctrine." "No," Zekthar said firmly. "Standard military doctrine is about winning battles and achieving strategic objectives. Human doctrine is about studying their enemy so completely that they can dismantle them piece by piece. Not just their military, their entire civilization," he tapped the table for emphasis. "From the moment we attacked Epsilon Prime, humanity began gathering data. Every engagement taught them about our technology, our tactics, our biology, our psychology. They did not just fight us, they performed surgery on us. They identified every weakness and exploited it with scientific precision." Another council member, an avian being named Krethal, spoke up. "But surely this kind of total war mentality is not sustainable. The psychological cost alone would be devastating to their society." Zekthar nodded. "You would think so, and you would be correct. After the war ended, I monitored human communications out of curiosity. Do you know what humanity did with their warriors? With the people who had fought so brutally? The council members waited. They quietly retired them. They classified the weapons and tactics as state secrets. They destroyed the biological weapons and banned their development. They tried to forget what they had done. Zekthar's voice grew intense. But here is what you must understand. They did not forget. They filed it away. Every tactic, every weapon, every method they developed for total warfare. It is all stored, cataloged, ready to be deployed again if needed. He looked directly at the viewing screen where the council members watched. Humanity was ashamed of what they became during the war with us. They did not celebrate their victory. They mourned what they had to do to achieve it. They are capable of tremendous empathy, creativity, and kindness. But all of that disappears the moment they feel threatened. Malvera asked the question carefully. What would you have us do with this information? Zekthar was quiet for a long moment. The Galactic Council welcomed humanity as members. You thought you were doing them a favor, allowing an emerging species to join the greater community. You thought you could guide them, manage them, keep them in check. He shook his head slowly. You have it backwards. Humanity does not need your protection. You need to ensure that humanity never feels threatened enough to go to war again. Because if they do, whatever species they fight will suffer as we did. Or worse, because humanity will have improved their methods since fighting us. Shardik spoke again, skepticism clear in their crystalline voice. You make them sound like monsters. But they are just one species among thousands. Surely they cannot be as dangerous as you claim. Zekthar turned his damaged eye toward that particular viewing screen. I watched a human frigate crew fight for 6 hours after their ship was crippled. I watched civilians turn themselves into weapons. I watched a young sergeant fight in hard vacuum for 7 minutes. I watched humanity build a plague specifically to kill Vraxians and nothing else. His voice rose slightly. They did not do these things because they are monsters. They did them because they are survivors. And there is no limit to what a survivor will do when backed into a corner. Malvera made a note on her datapad. The council will take your testimony into consideration. Is there anything else you wish to add? Zekthar thought for a moment, then spoke with careful deliberation. Yes, one final thing. After the war, I researched human history. I wanted to understand where this capacity for brutality came from. Do you know what I found? He did not wait for an answer. Humanity has been fighting wars against itself for their entire recorded history. They have practiced every form of warfare imaginable on their own species. They have conquered, enslaved, liberated, and destroyed their own kind countless times. By the time they reached the stars, they had already perfected the art of war through millennia of practice. Zekthar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. When we attacked Epsilon Prime, we thought we were fighting civilians and a small military force. We were actually fighting the descendants of warriors who had been refining the methods of total war for 10,000 years. We never stood a chance. He looked around the chamber one final time. So here's my warning to the Galactic Council and to every species listening. Treat humanity with respect. Honor your agreements with them. Give them no reason to view you as a threat. Because if you do, you will discover what we discovered. What is that? Malvera asked. That humanity's kindness is a choice. Their brutality is their nature. And when they stop choosing kindness, nothing in this galaxy can stop what they become. The testimony was over. Zekthar sat back in his chair, exhausted. The council members began to disconnect from the viewing screens. Taking the recording of his testimony with them, Malvera prepared to end the session. But she had one last question. What happened to the humans who fought in the war? The Admiral Cross, the Colonel Martin, the Sergeant Collins? Where are they now? Zekathar's mandibles moved in what might have been a sad smile. They returned to civilian life. Cross teaches military history at a university. Martin runs a farm on a colony world. Collins works as a construction supervisor. They went back to being ordinary people. That seems anticlimactic, Milvera observed. Does it? Zekthar asked. I find it terrifying, because it means that any human anywhere has the capacity to become what they became. The warrior is always there, beneath the surface, waiting, watching, ready. He stood slowly, his damaged body protesting the movement. Humanity is not evil. They are not cruel by nature. But they are absolutely uncompromising when it comes to survival. Remember that. Make sure the Council remembers that. Make sure every species in this galaxy understands. Malvera watched him leave the chamber, escorted by security. She looked down at her notes, at the recording that would be distributed to every council member. She wondered if they would truly understand the warning Zekthar had delivered. She wondered if anyone could really grasp the implications until they experienced it themselves, and she hoped, desperately, that no one would ever be foolish enough to give humanity a reason to go to war again, because if they did, the cold, unmatched brutality that Zekthar had described would seem merciful compared to what an angry humanity might unleash. The galaxy had been warned.